good evening to all our participants and good morning to those dialing from the UK. Thank you for joining us today. So to kickstart this webinar, I would like to welcome Mr. Darius Lim, Assistant CEO, SBF Global from SBF Federation, to give us a few words. Darius, please.
Thank you, Nicole. A very good afternoon to everyone. A very special thank you to High Commissioner Owen for joining us today. MTI colleagues, our participants dialing in from both Singapore and the United Kingdom. It is a pleasure to meet all of you, and thank you for putting some time this afternoon to join us. I'm happy to open this webinar that celebrates the entry into force of the United Kingdom Singapore FTA just last month on 11th of February. This agreement delivers on the promise of our respective governments in ensuring continuity in the trading relationship between the Singapore and United Kingdom. This trading relationship is important to businesses in Singapore. The United Kingdom is amongst Singapore's top 4 European trading partners, with total bilateral trade valued at 18 billion Singapore dollars in 2019. Singapore is also the UK's largest trade and investment partner in ASEAN. With the UK Singapore FTA, Singapore exporters will stand to benefit from the immediate elimination of tariffs on 84% of products into the United Kingdom. These include food products, electrical machinery, and petrochemical products. Tariffs on all the remaining products will be eliminated by end of 2024. While the agreement ensures continuity for many Singapore businesses trading with the UK, many have questions on how trade will change in terms of customs, processes, and regulatory compliance, particularly those which are using UK as a gateway or distribution hub into Europe. To answer these questions and to understand how the UK-Singapore FTA can help businesses, we are delighted today to have our speakers, and of course, once again, High Commissioner Owen, and also our Director for North America and Europe at the Singapore Ministry of Trade and Industry, Mr. Chua Sun Loong. We hope this webinar will help you understand the main benefits of this trade agreement, shed some light on the changes post-Brexit, and provide insights on the future of UK-Singapore trade relations. This webinar is part of the Singapore Business Federation's FTA Outreach series to help Singapore businesses understand how they can improve their competitiveness globally through the use of FTAs and support them in their FTA journey. We are working with MTI and other government agencies in Singapore and overseas, and private sector experts to plan a series of FTA activities in 2021. So please keep an eye out for any upcoming activities. Should you have any further questions or require any assistance navigating the broad range of Singapore's FTAs, including this new FTA with the United Kingdom, please do approach our FTA team, who is always on hand to help. Our FTA education and outreach efforts are also situated within our broader Global Connect at SBF framework. This is an initiative launched in partnership with Enterprise Singapore, and Global Connect's purpose is to work with Singapore companies with the main goal of helping them land successfully in commercial deals in overseas markets. And we framed this under Learn, Land, and Localize. So the UK FTA that we are speaking about today is an important part of these efforts, and we help the companies through Global Connect understand the use of FTAs and how to learn about them, and in particularly how to use them and leverage on them in landing in these markets. I would like to thank everyone once again for joining us this afternoon, and I wish everyone a fruitful webinar ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Darius. I think, as mentioned by Darius, we are delighted to have next Her Excellency Owen, UK High Commissioner to UK. to Singapore to give her opening remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Darius, for those opening remarks, and also Nicole, and all of your colleagues at the Singapore Business Federation and the British Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, BritCham for short, for co-hosting today's webinar. In some ways, being here with you, with ESG, MTI and UK departments, DIT and DEFRA, it feels a bit like a family gathering, given how closely we work together. And a really warm welcome to everybody who's dialing into today's event. It's the first detailed public webinar that we've had on the UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement since its conclusion in December and its entry into force last month. It's brilliant to see such strong attendance. We've had over 100 companies and stakeholders have registered. I think this demonstrates that there's a wide interest in the agreement and also in UK-Singapore trade relations more broadly. We've got a really fantastic panel of speakers lined up for you today, all of whom will have even more expert views than I do on all of the detail of the free trade agreement. I want to make a special mention of Chua Sun Loong, Singapore's chief negotiator for the UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement. Like any successful negotiator, he and his opposite number in the UK, Vivian Life, lived and breathed the detailed clauses, along with his team, including Judith, who you'll see later on, of the agreement in the final weeks of the negotiation. And we are really grateful for your excellent cooperation during those negotiations, and more generally for your support on our wider joint ambitions captured in the trade elements of the Partnership for the Future. Following the Brexit referendum as a matter of priority, the UK government wanted to deliver certainty to businesses and consumers through ensuring, wherever possible, continuity in the UK's existing trade relationships after the end of our transition period. Not only did we seek to replicate as far as possible the benefits of existing good EU trade agreements, as is the case in the UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement, but we also in some cases went beyond mere transitioning, for example with the UK-Japan Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, and we've also launched brand new trade negotiations with major partners such as the US, Australia and New Zealand. In the last couple of years, we have concluded free trade agreements with over 60 countries. We were joking with our trade minister when she was here that she probably has negotiated the most trade agreement in any 2-year period of any trade minister ever. And recently, as you may be aware, we've also applied to formally join the Cptpp. UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement was really excellent news for both the UK and Singapore. For us, it's the second biggest trade agreement in Asia Pacific, ensuring that UK business maintains enhanced access to Singapore's market and safeguarding a gateway to one of the most important regions of all for us. You'll hear details on the agreements from the other speakers, so I just wanted to say a few words about why trade relations with Singapore are so important to the UK. Singapore is our largest trading partner in ASEAN, and it's a really clear regional hub for UK business. Last year, total trade between the UK and Singapore was worth over £17 billion. Over 10,000 UK firms exported goods here. Many use Singapore as their regional headquarters and as a springboard to Asia Pacific. And over 5,000 UK companies are based here, 500 more than when I first arrived 18 months ago. The outward stock of FDI from the UK to Singapore was over £13 billion, and inward stock in the other direction was £8.6 billion. These are really significant numbers. And really importantly, the UK and Singapore are strongly aligned in our approach to international trade in general. We're supportive of the rules-based international trade system, and we are both advocates of deepening economic and trade cooperation around the world. That's important at any time, but given the period that we're living through at the moment, it's absolutely critical during the current challenges brought about for trade, for economies, for supply chains because of the COVID pandemic. So it's precisely in the light of these strong trade ties that our Secretary of State for International Trade, Liz Truss, travelled to Singapore last December. She came not only to sign the UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement, but she and Minister Chan Chun Sing had hours of detailed discussions on broader trade issues too. Easy to do with one of our key and most trusted and like-minded partners. George Thompson, Her Majesty's Deputy Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific, will explain later in this session that this is only the beginning of what we want to build within this relationship, making sure that we don't rest and that we continue a high level of ambition in charting out new exciting agreements. The UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement represents a platform on which we can build this ever stronger and more ambitious trade relations, from the Cptpp to our ambitions within the area of the digital economy. It's also part of a avowedly ambitious and outward-facing Britain. The Asia-Pacific region is a high priority for the UK government. We've also concluded FTAs with Vietnam, South Korea and Japan. And as I've said already, we've got ongoing negotiations with Australia and New Zealand. I hope that you find this webinar useful. Please don't hold back on any detailed questions that you've got, and the more difficult they are, the more I'm going to pass them on to the other members of the panel. If you still have questions about provisions of the UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement once the webinar has finished, or if you face any difficulties with fully benefiting from it, please don't hesitate to reach out to our Department for International Trade colleagues here at the High Commission in Singapore or in the UK. We are sharing contact details throughout, and we'll be really happy to help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cara. So I think now you'll hear from the Singapore's perspective. So we have Chua Sun Loong, Director of North America and Europe Division, and also the Singapore Chief Negotiator for UK Singapore Fta. Sun Loong, please.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I would like to start by thanking Ambassador Cara Owen for her kind remarks. I would like to say that, Singapore, on our side here in MTI, we also very much value the strong working relationship we have with our UK counterparts. And I do think that is the ultimate secret sauce behind why we managed to get the UK Singapore FTA over the line. And also it bodes very well for future collaborations to come. I also think that it's important that we recognize the strong contributions that the High Commission under Ambassador Cara Owen's leadership played, particularly in the end stages as we move the UK Singapore FTA towards signing. I would like to start today's remarks by first thanking SBF and BritCham for organizing this particular event. So soon after the UK Singapore FTA's entry into force, it gives the officials from both sides an opportunity to address possible questions from the business community and to help you utilize the FTA sooner rather than later. I think Ambassador Cara Owen has already given a very good overview of the strong bilateral economic relations we have between the UK and Singapore. I'm just going to add a couple of comments. In particular, the UK-Singapore FTA is significant for many reasons. I'm just going to highlight three of them. The first is that the UK-Singapore FTA is about continuity, but not just that, it's continuity in a year of disruption. I think we all remember 2020 as a very special year by all measures. You have the COVID-19 pandemic, you have geopolitical uncertainties that have accumulated in the recent years. There's also this larger backdrop of global pushback against globalization. So open and rules-based trade, stable and connected supply chains, these things that we have gotten used to, they're not to be taken for granted. And so when the UK and Singapore decided to sign on the line and bring the UK-Singapore FTA over the line, it really was a strong commitment as free trading nations to send a strong signal that we want to uphold an open and rules-based trading system. A second reason why I think the UK-Singapore FTA is very significant is because of how it provides seamless back-to-back coverage for businesses trading between the UK and Singapore. As we all know, prior to the end of the Brexit transition period last year, the EU-Singapore FTA had applied to bilateral trade between our two countries. So what we've done is with the UK-Singapore FTA, we ensure that on 31st December 2020, The moment the EU-Singapore FTA no longer applied, the UK-Singapore FTA immediately kicked in, accurate down to the last second. So there was no gap, no fall off, and no drop off in terms of FTA coverage for trade between the UK and Singapore. A third reason why the UK-Singapore FTA is a very significant agreement, I think, is that it's really testament to the maturity of economic relations between UK and Singapore. For those of us who are very active in the international trade circuit, as trade negotiators and professionals, we see trade relationships go through various development stages over time. The UK-Singapore FTA is a very comprehensive and ambitious FTA. In terms of its breadth and depth of scope and coverage, it ranks way up there along with some of the most high standard agreements in force today. For the UK and Singapore to conclude such an agreement, we really require like-mindedness, shared interests, and complementarities in the truest sense of the word. And significantly, it also means that we have a strong foundation to continue forging ahead and growing the relationship into the future. So stay tuned to this channel on UK-Singapore bilateral relations. A lot more will be in store. Between both of us, we've also committed to commence negotiations on investment protection 2 years after the entry into force of the UK-Singapore FTA, and to try to conclude within 4 years. We also agreed that we will launch negotiations on a digital economy agreement in early spring 2021, so it's coming up really soon. And there will be a lot of other ongoing and new collaborations between the UK and Singapore, again, very much reflecting the very strong, broad and deep relations between our two countries. I'm not going to speak very much longer. I would like to just conclude by wishing everybody a very fruitful session today. The officials from both sides present here today, we are very eager to share on the UK-Singapore FTA, as well as other aspects of our bilateral trade and economic relationship. We are also very eager to hear from all the businesses here today to learn how we can make all these trade tools more useful to you over time. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.
So thank you, Sun Loong, for the remarks. So now let me invite a representative from Singapore Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ms. Judith Ho, and from the UK Department for International Trade, Mr. Matthew Bilski, to shed some light on the UK-Singapore FTA. Judith and Matthew, let me share the screen. I can't find it anymore.
Sorry, a bit of technical difficulties there. And I'm not sure if I can see, if everyone can see the slides.
Yes, Judith, I can see it very clearly. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I'll begin. A very good evening to all. I'm Judith. Very good evening to all, and also not forgetting good morning to those joining us from the UK. I'm Judith from MTI's North America and Europe division. And I was also the Singapore's policy lead for the UKSFTA negotiations. Continuing in the spirit of the opening remarks, reflecting on our close partnership between the UK and Singapore, I think there's no better way than to share on the UKSFTA benefits jointly in this presentation between MTI and the UK's Department for International Trade. So I will be covering the first half of this presentation, and Matt Bilski from the UK's Department for International Trade will be covering the later half of the presentation. So as this presentation is only 20 minutes, we'll aim to provide a summary of the key benefits without going into too much technical details. Okay, so this presentation, we will provide an overview of the UK-Singapore bilateral economic relations, and then we'll cover also a bit of background on the UKSFTA, its modality, as well as its benefits. And at the end of the slide, we provide some useful resources that we hope will help you better understand the UKSFTA. So on the bilateral economic relations, I won't go into too much detail on the first part because I think it was already mentioned in the opening remarks on the strength of our trade relationship. But I just wanted to add here that also at the G2G level, we seek to broaden and deepen our cooperation through bilateral platforms such as the UK Singapore Economic Business Partnership. Some background on the UKSFTA. A key intent of the UKSFTA, as mentioned in the remarks, was to provide companies with certainty and clarity in the trading arrangements between the UK and Singapore following Brexit. So we sought to do this by preserving continuity in terms of the EU-SFTA benefits companies were already enjoying when trading between UK and Singapore pre-Brexit. So companies who are already familiar with the EU-SFTA and have been using it will be glad to know that you will continue to enjoy these same benefits when trading between the UK and Singapore under the UKSFTA. The UKSFTA is also the first FTA between the UK and an ASEAN member state. Apart from the FTA, both UK and Singapore, we've also committed to commence negotiations and conclude to endeavour to conclude an updated investment protection agreement within 2 and 4 years, respectively, of the UKSFTA's entry into force. So now I'll go back to a bit of the timeline of the UKSFTA and to cover a bit of the genesis and the history of this agreement. So in June 2016, that was when the Brexit referendum took place, when the UK voted to leave the EU. So this made it necessary for us to start our discussions on how we could ensure continuity in our robust UK-Singapore trade relations following Brexit. In October 2018, the EU-SFTA and the EU-Singapore Investment Protection Agreement were signed. In November 2019, the EU-SFTA entered into force. It then continued to apply to the UK-Singapore trade until the end of the Brexit transition period. In December 2020, just barely 3 months ago, as a reflection of that strong partnership, both the UK and Singapore signed the UKSFTA in order for the UKSFTA to come into effect as soon as the Brexit transition period ended. First via provisional application on 1st January 2021, and then formally entering into force on 11 February this year. So in sum, businesses can already enjoy the benefits of the UKSFTA and have been already able to do so since the beginning of the year. So I will pass the time briefly here to Matt, who will share more about the special modality of the UKSFTA.
Thank you so much, Judith, and hello, good morning and good evening to everyone on the line. Just before I jump into that, quickly introduce myself. So I'm, as mentioned, Matt Bilski. I work in the Asia Pacific Bilateral Trade Relations Directorate team, and I've recently taken the reins as implementation lead on the DIT side, at least from the London end, for the UK Singapore FTA. So well, Judith, can you maintain control and just skip to the next slide? So I'm just doing this one bit before I hand back to you. Thank you. So just to quickly cover off then the modality of the UKSFTA. So this by modality we mean essentially what approach we took to negotiations. So this is driven by the UK seeking to deliver maximum possible certainty to businesses and consumers, ensuring continuity in our trade relationships. So the aim was to maintain as far as possible the effects of our existing trade agreements, seeking technical application rather than full-blown negotiations. So we felt this is the most appropriate legal instrument. It gives that insurance of continuity, whilst incorporating relevant provisions of the EU agreement that preceded the UKSFTA. So yeah, the advantage of this approach really are just sending a clear message to businesses around, you know, that we just want to simply secure continuity for this agreement. It allows for a very clear legal text, so making the rights and obligations unambiguous, where they had by necessity changed. So that reduces the burden on both countries in terms of legal scrubbing, translation, domestic procedures, and ratification as well. We also felt at the time during negotiations it could accommodate different scenarios. You know, the starting point in which there was uncertainty around the future UK-EU trading relationship. It was an approach that gave us a bit of flex in that regard. So yeah, so basically it's all highlighted on a parliamentary report on gov.uk, which is added in the resources section at the end of the slide deck. So we have published a report that sets out all the key differences between the underlying EU agreement and the UK Singapore FTA. So yeah, do have a look at that. But yeah, I think essentially that's really a sort of to carry on with the next section of the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Matt. So now I'll move on to the key benefits of the UKSFTA, which I'm sure many businesses will be most keen to find out more about. I'll start off with the preferential tariff concessions. The preferential tariff concessions under the UKSFTA, they follow the same tariff elimination schedule and timeline as the EU SFTA. What does this mean? In essence, for Singapore, we continue to bind our existing custom duties that are already at MFN 0. And remaining customs duties on beer, stout, and samsu have been eliminated for UK exports to Singapore as they have been under the EU SFTA. On the UK's end, customs duties on 84% of all tariff lines for Singapore exports to the UK have been eliminated upon the entry into force of the UKSFTA, and virtually all remaining tariffs will be eliminated by 21st November 2024, which is 5 years from the entry into force of the EU SFTA, instead of 5 years from the entry into force of the UK SFTA. We understand that we've also already received some questions from businesses on the process for claiming preferential tariffs under the UK SFTA. The process actually, we follow the same self-certification system as the EU SFTA. Exporters in Singapore or the UK can submit an origin declaration that certifies that products are Singapore or UK originating. Importers can also indicate that they wish to claim for a preferential tariff treatment under the UK SFTA with the origin declaration. We've inserted some links here in the slide where you can find more details, including on the level of details you would need for that origin declaration. In terms of flexible rules of origin, the UK SFTA will continue to provide for liberal and flexible rules of origin for UK and Singapore key exports to each other's markets, including in the following sectors shown here, such as automobiles, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, as well as petrochemicals. Singapore companies will also continue to enjoy enhanced market access in the UK for Asian food products made in Singapore. Asian food products such as hakao or prawn dumplings and samosas can continue to enter the UK tariff-free up to a combined quota of 350 tonnes annually. The UK SFTA also provides for ASEAN and EU accumulation, where companies can use materials and parts sourced from both regions in claiming for preferential tariff treatment under the UK SFTA. For ASEAN, for selected products, according to Annex D of the UK SFTA protocol, materials and parts sourced from ASEAN member states can be used and qualified under the rules of origin for exports to the UK when the relevant arrangements are put in place. So similar to the EU SFTA, the UK SFTA requires ASEAN countries to provide undertakings of cooperation and compliance in order for ASEAN accumulation to take place. So under the UK SFTA, the UK has committed to reviewing this requirement after 1 year of the UK SFTA's entry into force. For EU accumulation, this was put in place to preserve the arrangement under the EU SFTA, where companies could use EU materials in their exports to each other's markets. So under the UK SFTA, UK and Singapore companies can continue to use EU 27 materials and parts in their exports to each other's markets, subject to following the necessary requirements under the UK SFTA protocol. We've also inserted a link here for further details on EU accumulation. Now I'll move on to the non-tariff barriers. UK and Singapore exporters will have lower operational costs with the reduction of duplicative testing and certification procedures, as well as other non-tariff barriers in the following 4 major sectors: electronics, motor vehicles and vehicle parts, pharmaceuticals, as well as renewable energy. So an example of this is in pharmaceuticals, where the UK has committed to endeavour to work with Singapore on recognising Singapore's standards of good manufacturing practices in the manufacture of active pharmaceutical ingredients as equivalent to its own. And this is without the need for written confirmation from the relevant regulatory authority. So I've come to the end of my section, and I'll pass the presentation over to Matt. Matt, please.
I'm just trying to request control of the slides while I wait for that to work. Yeah, so this slide sets out the provisions around enhanced market access for services. So essentially, sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so this is a really key area for us. I mean, services accounted for 40% of UK exports to Singapore in 2019. So we're really keen to ensure that we maintain continuity in this area, which this agreement does achieve. So essentially, the FTA sets out the treatment and the level of access to domestic market granted to the UK and Singaporean service suppliers. So this will ensure that businesses can get the same market opportunities and legal certainty for both sides, world-leading service sectors. So maintaining access to a whole range of sectors as outlined in the slide here. So the agreement also includes a package of measures that ensure a balanced agreement overall. So this includes additional places of business for UK banks, as well as improved market access. So such as an ability to open an additional 10 new customer service locations. And also under the negotiations, Singapore is committed to conducting a review into e-wallet limits later this year, which under Singapore's Payment Services Act, which came into operation in 2020, has certain restrictions, including hard caps on e-wallets and caps on annual flowouts from e-wallets as well as restrictions on ATM withdrawals. We've also agreed to a dialogue on future access for overseas firms to digital wholesale bank licenses, as set out in our joint declaration. So I'll move on to the next. Here we are. Okay. So sorry, it's been a bit of a lag there. So the next one is trade and sustainable development. So again, as the theme in all these slides is around continuity. So the Agreement Sustainable Development Chapter recognises that economic development, social development and environmental protections are independent and mutually reinforcing components of overall sustainable development. So it sets out the objective of promoting, developing and increasing the generation of energy from renewable and sustainable non-fossil sources, particularly through facilitating trade and investment. Moving on to government procurement. So again, this chapter provides for enforceable rules and standards for a transparent and non-discriminatory framework on government procurement. It liberalises specific procurement markets between both parties and provides enforceable market access commitments. And also retains from the EU-Singapore agreement commitments on public procurement that related to the UK and Singapore. There. The next bit is on enhanced IP rights. So basically, existing obligations on IP remain in place. And also, so through the UK Singapore FTA, we retain the GIs provided in the EU Singapore FTA. So in areas such as Irish whiskey, Irish cream, Scotch whiskey, and then so-called trans-border GIs that can, so for Irish whiskies that can be produced both in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. I'll whiz straight through these just in the interest of time. So the next bit is on customs facilitation. So essentially, yeah, the agreement contains rules designed to improve trade facilitation and transparency in customs procedures. So for example, by publishing customs regulations and simplifying and speeding up paperwork and physical checks. Other examples include pursuing harmonization of documentation and data requirements, and mutual recognition of our respective authorized economic operator schemes. So this enables certified AEO companies to benefit from facilitated documentary and cargo clearance for their shipments. So the next bit is on sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So again, this chapter concerns the application of food safety, animal and plant health regulations, and allows the UK and Singapore to set standards and regulations that allow for the protection of human, animal, or plant life and health. So again, it's maintaining the underlying agreements from the EU FTA. And so this basically includes provisions that go beyond the WTO's SPS agreement, which is entirely aimed at reducing costs for exporters. So as outlined here, one example is an ability to evaluate each other's inspection and certification systems for meat producing establishments. And a similar point is that the UK is currently approved to export beef, mutton, pork, poultry and processed eggs and farmed game to Singapore on a pre-listing basis. So this means that UK establishments are approved for export to Singapore based on recommendations from DEFRA. Yeah, and then after DEFRA's verification that the establishments meet Singapore's food agency pre-listing criteria as set out in the agreement. So this brings me to the end of the slides overall. The final slide, which will be, I believe this deck will be circulated after the talk, just lists here the various resources available online. So this includes an overview. I lost control of the slide pack, but essentially on UK side, you'll find on gov.uk a summary of the agreement itself, the agreement text, including all the annexes, and the parliamentary report, which outlines the differences between the UK agreement and the EU agreement, as mentioned earlier. And then our contact details at the bottom there as well. Yeah, that concludes this presentation. I hope that allows for plenty of questions at the end, which I look forward to hearing. And I'll hand back to the facilitator for the next bit of the discussion. Thank you.
So thank you, Matt and Judith. Thank you for the very good comprehensive overview of the agreement. So now next we have representative from the UK Department for International Trade and the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs to share about the key elements of the UK-EU trade deal and its potential impact on the UK-Singapore implementation. So Mr. Rob and Melanie, please.
Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Rob White from the Department for International Trade. I'm going to introduce the main elements of the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement before handing over to Melanie to provide some more details on the SPS arrangements. And I'm particularly going to mention the goods and customs elements of the deal. So the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which was reached on the 24th of December last year, creates a new relationship between the UK and the EU, a relationship based on free trade and friendly cooperation between sovereign equals. Skipping on to the next slide. The UK will be a global champion for free trade, benefiting businesses, reducing costs for consumers, and helping the poorest countries in the world achieve genuine economic independence. This will enable us to build secure new trade relationships across the world, including, as we've already heard, the UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement, which secures a critical relationship in the Indo-Pacific region and delivers vital certainty for UK businesses. So turning now to the main elements of the agreement, you can see on the slide I've set out some of them there, but just to run through them, crucially, there'll be no tariffs or quotas on the movement of goods we produce between the UK and the EU. The agreement secures continued market access across a broad scope of key service sectors, including professional and business services, supporting new and continued investment between businesses. It also means that business travellers will be able to move easily between the UK and the EU for short-term visits, and the agreement on financial services ensures financial stability and consumer protection. The agreement allows the UK to introduce their own modern subsidy system so we can support businesses to grow and thrive in a way that best suits the interests of UK industries. And the agreement is based on international law, not EU law, so there's no role for the European Court of Justice and no requirements for the UK to follow EU law. And then finally, the agreement meets the government's fundamental objective of ensuring that the EU has no control over UK rules, while meeting the government's manifesto commitment to uphold high labour, environment and climate standards. So turning now to the goods and rules of origin, rules of origin elements of the agreement. Crucially, the TCA ensures there will be zero tariffs or quotas on trade between the UK and the EU where goods meet the relevant rules of origin. The agreement includes provisions to facilitate trade and address non-tariff barriers for UK exports to the EU and vice versa. It includes modern and appropriate rules of origin, which mean that goods produced in either of our markets can qualify for zero tariff trade. The rules of origin will allow British manufacturers to use the significant levels of input from abroad in British products, where appropriate, such as sugar and confectionery or batteries in electric vehicles. But they prevent the UK having to accept imports from the EU at zero tariffs that are disproportionately produced elsewhere in the world. The UK secured product-specific rules of origin that are tailored to the needs of UK businesses in sectors such as automotive, aluminium, chemicals, machinery, and food and drink. The agreement includes bilateral accumulation, which allows companies to use both UK and EU ingredients or parts and consider them both as originating when working out if the product meets the rules of origin, as long as there is some processing on the EU ingredient or part. And I've included a link on the slide so you can find out more about the application of rules of origin there and look up the rules for specific products. Turning now to the customs elements of the agreement, the deal delivers on the government's promise to take the UK out of the EU's customs territory and regain control of UK borders. This means there will be new customs processes on goods headed from Britain into the EU and vice versa. The agreement reduces the cost of these new processes for traders by supporting efficient customs arrangements covering all trading goods, whilst ensuring that customs authorities remain able to protect their regulatory, security and financial interests. For example, both sides have committed to efficiently clear documentation, maintain transparency and simplify customs procedures wherever possible. We've also agreed to facilitate trade at roll-on, roll-off ports in particular, and to recognise each other's authorised economic operator security and safety schemes. The agreement will support cooperation and mutual assistance between authorities in the UK and EU on customs and VAT, including assistance in recovery of indirect taxes. This will help us to enforce our borders efficiently, to safeguard revenue and combat fraud, as well as facilitating legitimate trade. In addition, the agreement enables both sides to further reduce costs in the longer term. For example, we've agreed to explore the possibility of sharing import and export declaration data, setting up pilot programs where appropriate, with a view to reducing administrative burdens on businesses. And the customs chapter includes a few key areas. It has mutual recognition of our authorised economic operator schemes, which means that trusted traders will face less friction when moving their goods between the UK and the EU, facilitating trade and flow at the border. It has bespoke provisions to facilitate 45% of UK EU goods trade that flows through the roll-on, roll-off ports like Dover. Has a protocol on customs mutual administrative assistance, which will enable UK authorities to work with their EU counterparts to safeguard revenue and prevent fraud through reciprocal exchange of information. And finally, a protocol on VAT, cooperation and debt recovery, which will enable UK and EU authorities to cooperate and recover unpaid taxes on each other's behalf. So I'm going to move on to SPS at this point, and I will hand over to Melanie to run through those elements.
Thank you, Rob. I'm Melanie Southan from DEFRA. I'm going to be talking through some slides concerning the animal and plant health controls on imports into the United Kingdom, both from the EU and from third countries. So I'm going to start off with the animal health regulations. So the UK will be implementing full border controls on imports coming into Great Britain from the EU. Recognising businesses' ability to prepare, the UK government has taken the decision to introduce the new border controls in 3 stages up until July this year. How we're managing the controls on EU goods is contained within the board operating model, which is a very comprehensive guide to how all goods will be controlled, and I've put a link to that in the presentation. And for animals and animal products, the phasing will be from the 1st of January. From the 1st of January, live animals will be required to pre-notify on our new IT system, IPAFs, and travel with an export health certificate. From the 1st of April, product of animal origin will be required to pre-notify on IPAFs and travel with an export health certificate into the United Kingdom. And all EU goods will be controlled at a border control post for physical ID and documentary checks from July this year. However, for our rest of world trading partners, there will be very little difference in relation to us leaving the EU. There will be some small changes to our import system, the first of which will be a change in certification for export health certificates, where even though the actual conditions will be the same, there will be some presentational differences in our new Great Britain certificates rather than using the EU certificates. Next slide, please, Rob. Thank you. There will be a period of transition to enable trading partners, especially those sending goods from a long way away, to adopt to our new certificates. This was originally set out as ending on the 31st of March this year, but since I submitted the slides, a decision was taken last night that that transition period will be extended until the end of June now. So you've got an exclusive from this meeting. As I just mentioned, we have a new IT system replacing the EU's TRACES system, which is called IPAFs, and some information is linked there about how to access that system. Next slide, please, Rob. And in terms of listings and approval of establishments and countries, all of those will be rolled over and will be controlled domestically in our new office for SPS assurance, and the contact detail for market access inquiries is included at the bottom of the page. Thank you. Next slide, please. So plant health controls mirror the animal health controls in the 3 phases that they are going to be applied for EU goods coming into Great Britain. From the 1st of January, high priority plants will be required to travel with a phytosanitary certificate and to be pre-notified. From the 1st of April, all plants, well, those detailed in the link, will be required to travel with a phytosanitary certificate and pre-notified. And then from the 1st of July, all plants will be required to be inspected at a border control post. Next slide, please. For the rest of the world, for imports into Great Britain, there will be limited changes. So I'll just talk you through those. From the 1st of January, limited changes for exports from rest of the world into Great Britain. There'll be no changes to the format of the phytosanitary certificate, changes to the additional declarations to refer to Great Britain legislation rather than EU legislation. There'll be no changes to the processes required to import. There'll be no changes to the existing IT system. And Great Britain now uses the international concept of pest-free areas rather than the EU concept. Third countries are required to submit specific technical information to the UK National Plant Protection Organisation. And changes only apply to imports into Great Britain, which is England, Wales and Scotland. And there's a contact detail there for plant market access inquiries. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Sorry. Thank you so much for that. So I think one thing I would like to highlight also, if you guys are the participants, if you have any questions for our speakers at any point of the webinar, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll address the questions during the Q&A session. And next we'll have George Thompson, Her Majesty Deputy Trade Commissioner for APAC, to give us an overview of the UK priorities and the future of UK-Singapore trade relations.
Thank you, Nicole, and hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today. My thanks also to SBF and the Chamber for organising this excellent event. And if we can move to the next slide, please. So, first of all, kudos to all the previous speakers. I'm afraid I'll struggle to meet the high standards that they've set in avoiding acronyms, which unfortunately are rife in trade terminology. So a slight health warning for my remarks on that front, but I'll do my best to spell things out as I introduce them. In starting, I should emphasise the points made by our High Commissioner Cara earlier on about the importance of the UK Singapore FTA. Singapore is the 16th largest market for UK exports, and UK actually exports more to Singapore than it does to India, which gives you a sense of the scale of the trading relationship. It's a really significant milestone in the UK-Singapore trade relations, and I'm sure it's going to serve as a platform that we can build on to strengthen our trade relations even further in the coming years. Now, what I want to do today is explain a bit more about the UK's broader trade posture in the region and how some of these policies can help to further upgrade UK-Singapore trade relations. So the first thing to talk about is the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, which shows why I do use acronyms. So that's known to its friends as Cptpp, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it. So we submitted our notification of intent to begin the Cptpp accession process on the 1st of February. And this is the first formal step towards accession before formal negotiations start later this year. And the UK sees Cptpp as a first-class trade agreement in terms of scope, ambition, and also its membership. Through Cptpp, we would significantly upgrade our trade relations with Singapore and also the other members, and that includes 7 in this Asia-Pacific region, so Vietnam, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and then Malaysia and Brunei as well, although those 2 countries haven't ratified the deal yet. And I think I'd frame the benefits of Cptpp in 2 ways. So first, it creates new opportunities for the UK, but also Cptpp member countries. So the deal is one of the most important free trade areas in the world. If the UK joins, then the membership will account for nearly 20% of global GDP. The agreement removes tariffs on 95% of goods traded between members, and it reduces other barriers to trade across 4 continents. And as well as removing tariff barriers and trade barriers, Cptpp helps businesses trade easily across borders and keeps supply chains open and predictable, which is something that we've seen the particular importance of as we ride out the pandemic. The second way I'd frame it is we see Cptpp as helping shape and underpin rules-based trade. So the agreement sets genuinely modern 21st century rules and areas that are prominent in the future of the UK economy and also for Singapore. So this includes strategically important sectors such as digital, financial, professional and business services. So many of the free trade agreements in operation in the world today are written in a pre-digital economy. Cptpp is 21st century in that regard. So Cptpp has modern rules that allows data flow to flow freely between members, it removes unnecessary barriers for businesses, and it protects the commercial source code and encryption. And we look forward to starting Cptpp accession negotiations in the coming months. Now, the next topic to cover is the UK Singapore Digital Economy Agreement, or DEA. Now, I've explained that digital is a strength and a priority area for the UK. And as a forward-looking and digitally advanced economy, we want to explore emerging and innovative areas in digital trade with international partners. Singapore is similarly forward-looking and digitally advanced and clearly like-minded in this area. The demonstration of that is the DEAs they've concluded and are negotiating. So there's the DEPA, the deal with Chile and New Zealand that's already in force, as well as the DEA with Australia that's also in force. And there are ongoing negotiations with South Korea. So during her visit to Singapore in December, the UK Secretary of State for International Trade, Liz Truss, and the MTI Minister, Chan Chun Sing, announced the intention to launch negotiations for a UK-Singapore DEA in the early spring of this year. And the UK-Singapore DEA will complement the UK-Singapore FTA. It aspires to be a model for international digital trade rules and cooperation. So under the DEA, the UK and Singapore will aim to ensure an open, thriving and safe digital environment for our consumers and businesses. And the agreement will promote the flow of data across borders while maintaining high levels of personal data protection. And I think some of the things it would also promote, so interoperable digital systems to connect our thriving innovation systems, ecosystems, the interaction between financial services and the digital economy, which is critical. And it will help shape global standards for effective regulation in areas like cybersecurity and emerging technology. The DEA will also form a strong basis for the UK and Singapore's cooperation in the WTO. So most notably under the Joint Statement Initiative on e-commerce, but also via other multilateral fora. So the UK and Singapore can really publicly pursue a like-minded approach to global trade rules on data and digital. Now, I mentioned the intention to scope a DEA was launched in December. That work is ongoing and we're currently scoping the modules, and we intend to launch negotiations soon in the early spring, as I said. Now, I'll stay on digital, but move on now to the Digital Trade Network. So the UK launched a Digital Trade Network in June last year. It's the first initiative of its kind, and its aim is to increase digital tech trade and investment between the UK and Asia Pacific, and to build new digital tech partnerships in the region. The UK-Singapore DEA, which I was just talking about, is a prime example of these kind of partnerships. I think launching the Digital Trade Network in Asia Pacific demonstrates the great potential we see here in the UK's commitment to this region. The network is a joint initiative between the UK's Department for International Trade and the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. And it brings together digital trade policy, digital tech trade and investment, and a new tech entrepreneur network to support scaling tech businesses as they seek to internationalize. And by increasing UK digital tech expertise on the ground across a number of our key markets, so that includes Singapore, Japan, South Korea, Thailand, Indonesia, and Australia, the UK government wants to help innovative UK companies access new trade and investment opportunities. Tech Nation, who many of you will be familiar with, they're the UK tech scale-up experts, has joined the Digital Trade Network and is already working with UK businesses to participate in growth programs focused on Asia Pacific. And these build on their existing programs in fintech, AI, and cyber. So a really exciting initiative. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, next, I should touch on climate change cooperation. So this is a year of UK global leadership on climate as we take the presidency of the COP26 summit, which is held in Glasgow late this year, and we also take presidency of the G7. Climate change and the reversal of biodiversity loss is at the centre of the G7 plans. And the UK's aim this year is to rally as many countries as possible behind the target of net zero by 2050. Singapore itself is clearly positioned as a leader in Southeast Asia on climate ambition. It was the first country to announce a new 5-year commitment, and it remains the only one with a commitment to reach net zero. Now, Singapore's role is important not just because it is totemic as a country, but because it's a technological services and finance hub in the region. And it has its own self-interest in growing these sectors of strength, but that aligns well with the UK's goals for green growth. So what we do in Singapore can resonate around Southeast Asia as a region on climate. And we're optimistic. We see strong potential, particularly for carbon services growth. So that's the legal verification, monitoring, and financial services that that are built around the trade of carbon credits. And we want to build momentum as we get closer to COP26 and as voluntary carbon markets grow. So we saw in Singapore's recent budget announcement that it's positioning itself as a green finance hub, and the region's substantial natural assets will lend themselves to credit trading. Now, to frame net zero, by the end of last year, over 60% of global GDP was committed to net zero by mid-century. And with the hopeful expectation that we'll add the US to that by April, the pressure will build in the second half of the year towards ambition in some of the outliers in this region who haven't set 2050 ambitions or net zero ambitions. We expect to see substantial policy advocacy and donor attention, so big multilaterals, towards nature-based solutions in the region and energy transition, the finances of which will probably flow in large part through Singapore, and that underpins Singapore's ambitions in this space. Now, finally, I just want to mention our ASEAN engagement. The ASEAN region is a huge priority for the UK. In June 2020, we submitted our application for dialogue partner status. And at the end of August, the Secretary of State for International Trade, Liz Truss, attended the first ever UK-ASEAN economic dialogue. The UK is already a committed partner of ASEAN member states, working together on a range of global issues from transnational crime, climate change, as I mentioned, to the economic response of COVID-19. So a really broad range of areas. And I think with Singapore, we're very like-minded on a number of those issues. So bringing the UK into further alignment with ASEAN discussions there would be positive for both countries. Thank you, and I'll hand you back for the panel discussion.
So thank you to all our speakers. So before we move on to the Q&A session, we would just like to get a sensing on the UK Singapore FTA from our audience. So I think on your screen, you will see a short poll regarding a UK Singapore FTA. So we appreciate your answers on this. And I see a number of questions in the Q&A box. So I'll pass the floor to David Kelly for the Q&A session.
Thank you very, very much indeed, Nicole, and thank you to all of our current speakers. A really fabulous amount of content, and we've got about 20-25 minutes to run through some of your questions from the audience for our fabulous panel. Now, we have got sort of 8 or 9 people on the panel, so if I get overly excited and I address one question to the wrong person, please, panel, do jump in and feel free to support. So, I mean, we've had some questions that were sort of submitted through the Singapore Business Federation previously. So we've got some questions to go on to. So you've got a little bit of time just to sort of keep putting your questions in there. And I've just noticed the poll has started as well. So if it's good to see some of the questions coming through. Priscilla's asked, what new customs checks and formalities will apply for the UK from goods from Singapore to the UK more broadly? I think it's quite a fairly broad question, but perhaps Matthew, is there anything sort of specific that you can add in terms of that question for Priscilla?
Sorry, excuse me. There we are. Yeah, I wonder if Rob wants to come in on this one. We've just been discussing.
Yeah.
Sure, I can answer this one from the perspective of what's changed as a result of the UK-EU TCA, and the answer is that the customs provision shouldn't change as a result of the UK-EU TCA, and so businesses should face the same arrangements they did under the EU-Singapore FTA when they're taking things into the UK, is my understanding.
Great, thank you, Rob. I'm sure there's going to be lots of sort of questions around specific sectors that are coming up as well. So one question from Sue and Co around any advice for security companies looking to venture into the UK to train others. Perhaps we can ask that question to Rob again, if that's okay.
I can come in on this one, sorry. Yeah, so I think this one, if I understood the question correctly, I'd say that the agreement itself, I don't believe does cover this area specifically. I think that's one that we would have to follow up with the relevant government department on. I believe it might be one that we'd have to take up with our BASE colleagues. But I don't know if Judith or anyone else from the MTI side has any thoughts on this one.
Hi, Matt. I do agree that we probably can take this question offline. If we could get more details also, I think, on what kind of areas that the company is looking to venture into, and then we can, yeah, I think BASE would be a good person to consult on this question.
This is Shalong here. If I can just quickly jump in, I think if it's a Singapore-based company trying to go over to the UK, we also have our colleagues over at the Enterprise Singapore who may be able to be in touch as well. So please feel free to get in touch with us to provide further details. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chua Sun Loong. And just a reminder for everybody on the call that the contact details are put in the chat box as well for everybody if there are any specific questions that don't get answered or that you think of after this call as well. If I could just quickly bring in Her Excellency Cara Owen. Certainly one of the things that we work on collectively between the High Commission and the British Chamber, and certainly with our friends at the EDB and Enterprise Singapore around partnerships. Can perhaps just sort of provide a bit of a flavour around some of the benefits and the opportunities that you've seen in terms of building meaningful partnerships between Singapore companies and UK companies, just to sort of set the scene from that perspective.
Thanks very much, David. So I think broadly, we talk very frequently with the Singapore government and with Singapore companies about some of the prime areas of partnership that we see. We're two major financial services centres, and we really have very strong tech sectors as well. And many of our companies, including small and medium enterprises, are really advanced in terms of bringing to the market emerging technology. So we have found, and the British Chamber and the Department of International Trade team at the High Commission work together in trying to get these sectors together. George has already talked as well about the sustainability sector. So even throughout the challenges of last year, when some sectors were finding it more difficult to look at internationalising what they were trying to do, our sustainability related companies were absolutely starting to fly. I think the strong demand signals from this part of the world for having really good sustainability capability, be that technological, around engineering, or in the areas that George was talking about, around things like measurement and impact that are going to underpin things like the growth of the voluntary carbon market here in this region and in Singapore specifically. All of those demand signals are being heard. So I think by taking a very clear view of what we think the emerging sectors are likely to be it around tech, be it around sustainability, be it around transport and logistics, infrastructure, we have been able to broker lots of partnerships. And working with Enterprise Singapore and EDB at one side, and with the Department of International Trade and BASE at the other, government on both sides, alongside the chambers, are helping to support.
Yes, thank you, Cara. If I could bring sort of George into the conversation as well. Sort of certainly working with our colleagues at UK Export Finance, for example, is there sort of funding available for Singapore companies that are looking to partner with partners in the UK, and vice versa, really? Because I know we've got a sort of a mix of an audience here today. Are there opportunities in terms of being able to provide sort of trade finance and export finance for companies that are looking to grow on both sides of the world?
Thanks, David. I'll come in first. I mean, first of all, it's great that you've mentioned UK Export Finance. We always like to, well, it's often considered the best kept secret in Whitehall, and we're really pushing its set of product offers across Asia Pacific. So its mission is that no UK export should ever fail for lack of finance or insurance. And it's a very, very versatile institution in terms of getting projects off the ground, deal making in many different international currencies, risk insurance, that kind of thing. So we really want to push its visibility in Singapore and the region across a number of sectors, but obviously things like infrastructure lend themselves well to export finance. On specific business support, I'm going to possibly slightly pause and encourage people to look out for what comes out of the UK budget tomorrow, because the Chancellor of the Exchequer will be summarising the latest sort of fiscal year initiatives for the UK. But Cara mentioned DIT and BAYS as the interface for Singaporean companies coming to the UK. I'm particularly interested in how we can sort of improve the channel for companies to get to also UK local governments and UK growth agencies. I think that works quite well at the moment, but there's always more we can do, and that's one thing the Department for International Trade is keen to help on. Thanks.
Thanks, George. If I could just stick with you very quickly, I mean, there's the sort of the UK export trade plan, isn't there? I think that a number of us are working sort of towards. And there's a brilliant clustering of key industries in the UK as well, and Cara highlighted some of those earlier. But what would be the best way for Singaporean companies and those that are based in Singapore to look at those opportunities around different sectors such as, you know, medtech, edtech, fintech? Are there sort of clusters of organisations that can support that facilitation of conversation?
Yeah, there absolutely are, and I would just encourage any Singaporean countries that might need some guidance or signposting can always contact the Department for International Trade here at the High Commission, and we're happy to help with that signposting into the ecosystem.
Thank you, George. If I can bring Sun Loong and Judith into the conversation as well. One of the questions that we've received is, are there any new opportunities that the free trade agreement between Singapore and the UK allows that the EU free trade agreement did not?
Thanks, David, for that question. I'm going to just share some of my thoughts, and I'll invite my colleague Judith to jump in as well. I think if we go back to the policy intent behind the UK Singapore FTA, our idea was to give companies maximum certainty and clarity that there will be continuity in trade arrangements between our two countries. So really following from that particular policy intent, I would say there aren't that many differences between the two agreements. However, we do have a couple of changes and adjustments really to reflect the fact that we're going from a multi-party arrangement to a bilateral arrangement. And for instance, I think we are quite mindful that after all, our colleagues in the UK, there's one country versus say a multi-party setting of 28. So the quota for Singapore Asian food exports to the UK was also adjusted downwards. I think it used to be 1,250 tons under the EU-Singapore FTA, but within the bilateral arrangement between the UK and Singapore, it is, I think, 350 tons instead. Yeah. Judith, would you like to add any further points?
Thanks, Sun Loong. Yeah, so I echo the point about the policy intent, which is to preserve the EU SFTA continuity. Just one point that I wanted to add was on the EU accumulation, which I had mentioned earlier in my slides. So EU accumulation, for obvious purposes, did not have to be a specific explicit commitment under the EU SFTA when the UK was still a member of the EU, but to preserve that arrangement where companies can continue to source for materials and parts from the EU, we had to have that arrangement written out as a commitment under the UK SFTA. And I think another point which might touch on another question that has been posed by our panelists, which is on digital trade. So while that's not really a key difference within the UK SFTA as it's currently set out, there is the e-commerce provisions within the UK SFTA, which are largely which are similar to the EU SFTA e-commerce provisions, but as the presenters and has been mentioned also in the opening remarks, we are looking to negotiate a UK Singapore Digital Economy Agreement, which goes beyond the provisions in the e-commerce chapter. Because I mean, it's been some time since we concluded negotiations on the EU SFTA, so there are definitely a lot that can be updated within that e-commerce provision chapter.
And Judith, Shalom, if we just sort of stick with you, and perhaps we can bring Rob into this question as well. Are there sort of two different sets of regulations and compliance procedures that will sort of serve both the EU and UK markets? And a bit of a follow-on question here is, are there re-export challenges for companies that are exporting to the UK that might sort of manufacture something small and then re-export it into the EU? Can you provide some sort of flavour of some advice around that area as well?
Thank you, David. I'm going to try to redirect the question over to Rob, if Rob doesn't mind, to share with us your view from the UK side. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much. And yeah, I think the answer to the question is that the UK, well, the new relationship between the UK and the EU does give the UK the freedom to diverge from EU rules, but the UK and the EU have made a joint commitment to maintain high standards similar to those found in all modern FTAs. And obviously at this moment, the standards remain very similar in a lot of areas. What I would suggest is the two bits of guidance that were, well, the guidance that was on mine and Melanie's slides will provide more details on the specific areas. But I think the overall answer to the question is that the UK does now have the freedom to diverge from EU rules. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Rob. If I can just quickly add, I think between the UK and Singapore, our intention is also to try to enable companies as much as possible. And towards the end, we're mindful that there are existing supply chain arrangements regionally in Europe as well. And that actually is partly the reason why we put in place the EU 27 cumulation provision in the UK Singapore FTA to allow our companies to continue their supply chain relationships and to ensure that those are seamless to the fullest extent possible. And I recall that for the UK and Singapore as well, we have contact points out there as well to address some of these possible unforeseen, supply chain related issues down the road. So please do not hesitate to contact us, both the DIT as well as MTI. Thank you.
Thanks, Sun Loong. George, perhaps we've got a question here from regarding sort of Scotch whisky, with Singapore being one of the most important export markets for Scotch. What sort of protections are provided for or within the new FTA, and will this also be a key focus area for the Cptpp? Have you got sort of any sort of broad advice around the Scotch whisky piece?
Thanks, David. I'm probably going to defer to colleagues on this one, if I may. Obviously, it's a huge sector for us, and it is protected in the FTA. I can't provide a huge amount more detail to that. I might pass to Matthew, if I may.
Sure, yeah, thank you, George. Yeah, I mean, great question. I suppose we did cover this a bit in the presentation, but just to reiterate, so existing obligations on IP and GIs remain in place. So that does include Scotch whisky. So yeah, basically the agreement retains all the GIs provided in the EU Singapore FTA. Yeah, I think that's basically the answer to the question. So essentially, yes, is the answer. I can't say much more about Cptpp. I understand that it will be an area of focus there as well. I think we have to come back to you on that one, but I think that the agreement itself does ensure that protection, even in advance of TPP accession.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Sun Loong and Judith, we've sort of got a question here around support for SMEs. I know this is quite a broad question, but are there any sort of specifics within the UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement that really supports small to medium sized enterprises? I know we've talked a little bit about UK export finance, we've talked a little bit about some of the funding available and some of the organisations that companies can talk to, but is there anything sort of specific that you want to draw out around supporting SMEs export from Singapore to the UK?
Thanks much, David, for the opportunity to highlight this, which I think is an issue that's very relevant to both the UK and Singapore, because we want to make sure that the FTA as a tool is useful to companies of all sizes. I would say in the case of Singapore, we do have a very active space where SMEs in Singapore, they export food products to Europe, and I would say the UK is probably one of most of the food exporters' largest markets amongst all the SMEs. So, like I mentioned just now, we do have liberal and flexible rules of origin that can apply to Asian processed food exports from Singapore to the UK. And actually, just to quickly add also that I'm also aware that in the UK, I don't believe that there are actually UK companies producing those Asian food products as well. So things like spicy ikan bilis, I think Judith might not have mentioned that, samosas, hakao, I think all those things are in some ways a culinary and cultural exchange between the Singapore and the UK. And this is one specific area of complementarity between our two economies. Our SMEs can export over there, and consumers in UK will also get the benefit from the choices available. Judith, do you have any points to add to that?
Yeah, so I wanted to add a point also. I think in addition to tariff barriers, another problem that SMEs and a lot of other businesses may face will be on the aspect of non-tariff barriers, which I had covered in my slides as well. And I think this is one specific area that would be very helpful for our SMEs in that it provides certainty and it also reduces costs, the operational costs for businesses by reducing the need for certain duplicative testing and conforming to different kinds of standards. So I think this would be another area in those four major sectors that I highlighted in my presentation that would be helpful to SMEs.
Thanks, Sun Loong. Thank you, Judith. If I could bring Melanie into the conversation, we did have a couple of questions previously around SPS or sanitary and phytosanitary measures. You talked about IPAFs replacing EU traces. Is there any more sort of detail you can provide around what this actually means for Singapore exporters to the UK in terms of the process and how they can apply that and what they need to look for?
Thank you. I'm afraid I'm not a great expert in this, but IPAFs has been created to sort of mirror the functionality of traces, and it's hosted on gov.uk, so it's a web-based service that people can log into. All of the details are set out step by step on the link that I set out, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to take any other more detailed questions away with me.
No problem, thanks. Is there any sort of more flavour? Sam can add to that.
Not much more than has just been said. We won't be using IPAFs for plants just yet. So IPAFs was launched for products of animal origin and so on as a way of kind of gently introducing a new IT system rather than everything at once. So at the minute, we're still using our old IT systems. So exporters in Singapore will continue to use the systems they're already aware of. We will be moving to IPAFs later this year.
Great stuff, thank you. I've probably got time for one more question. Eileen's put this question in twice, so is probably desperate to get an answer to it. And that is, will there be any changes to withholding taxes? This is directly related to ship chartering services and not products. So I appreciate this is very sector specific, but is there anybody in the panel that can provide an answer to that question for Eileen?
Hi, David. Eileen, with regards to your question about withholding taxes, I'm afraid I think we need to take that back because that's probably an issue that will be covered by the DTA between Singapore and the UK. Double tax avoidance agreement as opposed to the UK Singapore FTA. But we'll try to get back to you through SBF or Bridgen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the panel. Thank you for your patience as well and for jumping in on the correct questions. That was superb. Thank you so much for your knowledge. In the essence of time, I'm going to pass back to Nicole, who I think is going to bring in the wrap up of the session and hand back to the British High Commissioner, Her Excellency Cara Owen, and Singapore's Chief Negotiator, Chua Sun Loong. So thank you very much indeed.
So thank you, David, so much for moderating the session, and thank you for all our participants for your questions and for your to our speakers for your answers. So now I'll pass it on to Cara to give her wrap-up remarks.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you to all of the panelists who set out in such detail what the UKSFTA is all about, and also to those of you who dialed in and posed such great questions. I think one of the key things that I would love you to take away from this webinar is the fact that you have got help available if you've got really detailed questions, or if you're left with questions that you felt weren't answered by the presentations. We're really keen that this moment of looking at what the UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement offers is a moment where people can really think again about whether or not they are seeking to export to the UK or to Singapore, or to partner with companies in either of those countries. So please don't leave a question unasked. Take away the contact details that are in the chat bar, and I really look forward to meeting some of you as you grow your trade. Sun Loong.
Thanks very much, Cara. Thanks for summing up the discussions that we've had thus far. I think it's been a very fruitful and productive session for all of us. I just wanted to add that I think it is a many helping hands type of approach that we need to take to ensure that the UK Singapore FTA remains a living agreement that's very much alive and growing. Because the work certainly doesn't end there with just the signature and its entry into force. I think between the UK and Singapore, we're committed to continuously strengthen the economic relationship. And actually within the UK Singapore FTA itself, there are arrangements and provisions for us to continually review the agreement and seek to improve it over time. And in fact, I think just this year, we will be convening the first UK Singapore FTA Trade Committee meeting, which will be chaired at the ministers level. And during that committee meeting itself, I think both sides will expect to take stock of the UK Singapore FTA's implementation since entry into force, and to look at how else we can further improve the agreement. And I would say the digital economy, that particular idea is probably going to be a major a step forward for both sides. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, Sun Loong, and thank you, Cara, for that. I think before I hand it over to David for the closing remarks, we'd like to seek the participants for your feedback on today's webinar. So just so on your screen, you just see a very short poll, Zoom poll. So you appreciate your feedback for today's webinar. And David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you. What a great session. And thank you so much to all of our speakers again, Her Excellency Cara Owen, Chua Sun Loong, Darius Lim, Judith Ho, Matthew Bilski, Rob Whiteway, Melanie Southan, Sam Bishop, and George Thompson. Thank you very, very much for your time and for your sharing today. I think, as the High Commissioner mentioned right at the beginning of this session, along with Sun Loong, this session really did demonstrate the interest in Singapore and UK trade relations, and that there is help available for any supplementary questions. So please do make sure you put that through to those that have shared their contact details today. You can also thank you very much indeed to the British High Commission here in Singapore, to the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and to the Singapore Business Federation for pulling today's session together along with ourselves, creating a platform such as this to communicate developments within the trading environment to support businesses is absolutely something that the British Chamber of Commerce in Singapore is very happy to support. So on behalf of the organisers today, we hope that you found today's session to be useful. Once again, please do reach out to any of us or the UK Singapore Free Trade Agreement team with their details that they put through in the chat function for any supplementary questions that you may have. So thank you for joining us. For those of you in Singapore, have a great evening. And for those of you dialing in from the UK, have a good rest of the day. Take care, and thanks once again.